President-elect, invited guests, comrades, colleagues, and friends of the ASTI. Socrates said, "I cannot teach anybody anything. I can only make them think." When I attended my first ASTI convention in 1995 in Ennis, fortunately, I picked a great one. Garrod O'Tuathaigh was the guest speaker of the then President, Sean Higgins, RIP, and he certainly made me think. And I think you understand tonight why I've often raved about the way he can get into the brain. John Cunningham quotes Garrod from that occasion in his history of the ASTI, Unlikely Radicals, Irish Post-Primary Teachers and the ASTI, 1909 to 2009 as follows. He said, "Teaching is not an action, but a transaction, not an outcome, but a process, not a performance, but an emotional and intellectual connection between teacher and learner. It cannot be assessed by any single dimension of quality, nor can it be assessed at all without deep knowledge of its setting, styles, and the orientations of the teachers." I thank Garrod for coming back this evening, for returning to these themes this evening. Míle buíochas sa Garrod. One of the honours of being an ASTI President is that you know that great people have worn this chain before you. Sean Higgins' name will forever be associated with the Drogheda branch, where his great ASTI service began. And his wife Mary continues that tradition of service this evening as a delegate from the West Mayo branch. The link with Sean in 1995 has, of course, a special meaning for Mary, and she's down there in the hall somewhere, and on behalf of the convention, I want to welcome her here this evening. Sheila Drudy has a new book generally on Irish education. I was perusing it recently, and interestingly, she was making a comparison between the 1990s in education and now. And I summarised the next paragraph basically on what she had written. She said, "Today's schools are very different places from what they were in the mid-90s. Today's post-primary schools serve pupils from a very broad spectrum of individual needs and backgrounds that would have been unimaginable in 1995. Most students with disabilities and special educational needs have been enrolled in mainstream schools. An estimated 18% of the school-going population have special educational needs. In their student populations, schools today have up to 20 nationalities with diverse linguistic, cultural and religious backgrounds. Some schools have over 20% of their pupils from immigrant families, of whom 70% are non-English speakers. Today, mainstream teachers work alongside special needs assistants, learning support, language support and resource teachers in their classrooms and schools. The percentage of young adults of 18 and 19 years of age in our schools has increased, but significant educational disadvantage based on social class and socioeconomic status remains. Some people will tell you that teaching is a lot easier. The skills and competencies required from teachers today are different and much more demanding than ever before. In 1995, the industrial relations climate at that time in a recovering economy was much more benign than it is today. The fallout from the building, banking and economic crisis of the last 2 years has created the most difficult and challenging environment for education and industrial relations. An unbelievably difficult environment. The moratorium on posts of responsibility in post-primary schools, I want to deal with that issue separately. Last year, the moratorium on appointments to assistant principals and special duty positions was included in the broader public service moratorium. Post-primary schools are large, complex organisations that deliver a broad and diverse curriculum. A school of 500, 600 or 700 pupils cannot function effectively without year heads, programme coordinators, exam secretaries, etc. Ad hoc arrangements and overburdening contract hours are not the solution to this crisis. We welcome the Dáil statement by the outgoing Minister for Education and further assurances from the incoming Minister that the matter is under review. This situation is critical. It must be resolved satisfactorily to preserve the quality of education in our schools and in our country, because this is essentially an educational cutback. Entry into post-primary teaching is now dominated by a culture of hours. One of the major structural challenges that preceded this current economic crisis and persists at the present time is the ad hoc, fragmented and unstructured entry into post-primary teaching post-graduation. Student teachers in Ireland are academically high achievers, which is not typically the case internationally. We get the best of people into teaching, top quality people. The recent OECD TALIS report showed that Ireland has the highest proportion of part-time and temporary teaching contracts. While the work of trade unions like the ASTI in getting pro-rata payments and the granting of CID contracts has improved the pay and working conditions of new non-permanent teachers, major difficulties still exist and are being institutionalised. A new teacher will invariably get a fixed-term contract for a year or less. But unlike in primary teaching, the contract of employment is often for less than full hours. Hence, the teacher is on partial pay. And on an aside note, the pay cuts last year took a pay cut of those same people. This will often persist for several years, and if the teacher qualifies for a CID, the contracted hours under the CID may also be for partial hours and partial salary. This is leading to an involuntary casualisation of the profession. Meanwhile, progressive systems of teacher induction, probation and mentoring are impossible. Other countries are doing it differently. In Scotland, all new teachers are guaranteed a job placement for at least 1 year. The new teacher should not be a mere convenience to do residual hours and everything else in the system. This culture of ours is very damaging to our profession. The anxiety that uncertain tenure and variable hours create in individuals raises significant teacher welfare issues. It also has consequences for the school learning environment. For example, the recent OECD TALIS report found that teachers were more likely to display negative behaviour in classes with temporary teachers, and this is regardless of factors such as the age of the teacher. Now I come to the most difficult part of my talk today, which deals with the current agreement. The current agreement is extremely difficult territory. This convention takes place at a pressing and momentous juncture in our industrial relations strategy. The inevitable implosion of the property bubble and the fallout from the banking scandals has wreaked havoc in our economy, society and industrial relations. Unfortunately, the inequitable and grossly unfair response of the government to the crisis has aggravated the situation still much further. The trade unions' offer of a negotiated social solidarity pact throughout 2009, based on thresholds of decency, was rejected. Instead, conciliation and arbitration schemes were ignored, as 2 pay cuts, one under the guise of a pensions levy, were imposed